All right, let's begin. And how do you create this intimate alignment in the environments of complexity and unite tech with business? Get the answer from our first expert, Edward Marx, who is a healthcare innovator and a leader with over 2 decades of experience in digital transformation, strategy, and execution. Edward, please take the floor.
Hey, thank you, Victor. And it's great to be talking about digitally enabled healthcare transformation. Certainly one of my favorite topics. And I think everyone will appreciate why by the time we get through. But I'm really honored to be presenting along with my colleagues, Mark and Simon as well. So really set to get going. So with that, let's go ahead and start on this topic and moving from pockets of brilliance to enterprises of excellence. So how do you do it? So the first thing on the next slide, what we want to talk about is what is digitally enabled business transformation. Everyone has a different definition. There's no perfect definition, but just so that we're all on the same sort of framework as we begin. For me, it's really about three things. One is the business processes, right? It's less about the tech, as which we'll get to, but it's really about the business processes and ultimately the customer experience. So in this case, for us, patients and their families, as well as clinicians who are taking care of patients. And then undergirding a lot of that is the whole science, with data and analytics and the ability to make smart decisions. And I won't give you the buzzwords because others will do that. But I think we're all pretty smart on all the different buzzwords that we use in our industry. But when I think about business transformation, digitally enabled, it's really about business processes, it's about experience, and then the leveraging of data analytics that we get from that. So I call it survival of the digitalist. All right, so let's move on how you get that. So on the next slide, my first caveat, maybe my one and only caveat, is in the country of Honduras, which sits in Central America. It's in a precarious location geographically because it's susceptible to really dangerous weather, hurricanes specifically. And as a result, for many, many decades, it has just hurt the country in terms of its ability to move forward economically because of the hazards that these weather situations cause for the country. And so in particular, there was a Choluteca River. So there's a great river that runs through the country, and it's really important that commerce is able to transverse that river. And so it was always getting destroyed. Anything they tried to pull across the river, what bridges they made, were getting destroyed and keeping east to west flowing and hurting the country economically. And so all the great planners got together with great designers and architects out of Japan who are used to making structures to withstand the elements. And they built this beautiful bridge called the Choluteca Bridge. And it's beautiful, so beautiful that they would advertise the bridge as part of their trying to attract visitors to their country. So in 1998, Hurricane Mitch came through, and on the next slide, you'll see the results. So what happened was the bridge withstood the result of the hurricane on that next slide, but the river moved. And so the real important thing here is that while it's great to be thinking strategically, and I'm a big believer in strategy, we have to be agile. So when it comes to digital transformation, you have to be agile. So you can see the bridge withstood, but the river got moved in the process of the storm. So if we're agile, we can move that bridge with wherever the river is going, right? Because it changes. There's a new technology that pops up every couple of years. That's an absolute game changer. So as we think about business enabled, digitally enabled healthcare transformation, make sure you keep agile in mind of everything we're about to talk about. All right, so now we're going to go on the next slide. We're going to start in. It's really 2 slides of content here. And there's going to be 6 things that enable business transformation, and none of them are technical. Okay, so you need the technical, and other speakers are going to cover some of the technical aspects of that. But I'm telling you, if you want to succeed, you could have the best technology in the world, but if you're not agile and you don't incorporate these 6 things that I'm going to talk about, you will fail. And the beautiful thing about the 6 things that I'm going to speak about is they're all free. Oftentimes people say, well, I can't do that because I don't have a budget. I get it. Budgets are super helpful. But in the things I'm going to talk about, no budget required. All right, here we go. I'm going to try to give you one example from my experience on each one of these 6 things. And hopefully between the definition and the example, it'll make a lot of sense how you can do the same thing. And I'll just talk for about 15 more minutes and leave 10 minutes at the end for any questions that you might have. All right, embed yourself in the business. All right, so how do you embed yourself in the business? There's multiple ways. One is just to have a business relationship manager. Now, it doesn't have to be a full-time employee. Again, I told you everything I'm going to share is free. It can be an additional duty as assigned. So when I was working my way up the ranks before I became a CIO, I often worked in environments like this, and I had multiple clients within our healthcare system. And my job, and then when I was CIO, I assigned people to do the same, was to make it so compelling to the business unit that they thought you worked for them, right? So these business relationship managers are so embedded, they attend their own C-suite that the business might have or their leadership cohort. They act and talk just like any member, so that if someone came through a third party and looked at a team meeting, they wouldn't know that one person was actually from IT in a different division. So they're so embedded. It's so critical that you do this, because that's the only way to gain the trust, understand the business, and then you bring that back to IT. So IT can make sure that we have great digital transformation because we know the client intimately. So this is a deep, deep connection of embedding in the business. All right, cross-pollination. So one of the jobs for us as leaders is to connect that brain to the heart. And I'm going to give you some examples. So cross-pollination. So I'm going to give you a super personal example, and then I'm going to give you one for your whole team. So I worked in the OR 1 day a week. So I worked a full shift. That's embedding in the business and cross-pollination. So I knew when I spoke to my clients, which were mostly clinicians and administration, I not only knew my job as the CIO, but I knew their jobs as well. Why? Because I worked in their environment 1 day a week. Yep, I did it 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. So I did it in addition to my regular job, and I served as an anesthesia tech. I'm telling you, you could do any job. It's not going to be a super technical job, a clinically technical job, but you can volunteer for anything and work one shift a week. It'll be a game changer for your leadership stature in your organization. Now, if that's just too much, the other thing you can do, and I did this also, was volunteer weekly. So you want to really learn the business, volunteer. And so I was a patient volunteer up on the chemo floor. So we had outpatient chemo, and my mom had outpatient chemo. So I knew that, man, I would never want my mom to be alone. And there's patients that show up alone. And so I got to hang out with them 1 hour a week during my lunchtime on Thursdays. So this is another easy thing to do. But here's the best one for all of the team. So every person, including administrative assistants, and so in some cases I had 1,500 employees, everyone spent 1 day a year with a clinician. Now, 1 day a year may not sound like much, but when you multiply that by all the years you do such programs, it's a lot. So in any cases, it's typically like I've been places for 8 years at a time. So that meant that person had that experience 8 times. So 8 full days. My only requirement, and they could pick everything, and the administration loves this. Are you kidding me? To say, hey, I care about you so much that I'm going to not work 1 day so I can just experience what you experience as a nurse, what you experience as a med tech, what you experience as a lab tech, or what you experience as a doctor. And then, so the whole health system will open up to you. I've done this in multiple health systems. The whole health system will open up to you and offer you anything you want to do, which is great for your employees, because some might want to be part of a heart surgery team. Some of them might want to just spend time in the lab, whatever it is. The only requirement was that they do a little write-up at the end of each one about what they learned. And I'll give you one example how profound this is. So I had one person say, Mr. Marx, when you came up with this idea, I thought it was the dumbest thing ever. I've got a big backlog of things I need to do for my clients. And I was like, oh my gosh, really? We have to do this? He goes, I've been working here for 25 years and I never knew we had patients. Now, of course, he knew we had patients. He knew here that he worked for a health system. We took care of patients, but he didn't know here in the heart. And when that happened, he transformed and he became the best dang database administrator ever. He was fully engaged in his job and became that much more efficient, and he had meaning for his life and for his career. So I cannot overemphasize. Again, this is all free. It takes some coordination, but it's free. And I'm telling you, it'll change the lives of your people, and you'll never become a more tighter, close-knit team that is hyper-focused on taking care of patients. All right, next one, shared business objectives. So this is easy. So everyone has business objectives, right? You're rated on them at least annually. Some of you might call them KPIs or OKRs. We call them OKRs. And so with the med staff in particular, this was very troublesome, right? Because clinicians, physicians in particular, we were bringing lots of change on them, electronic health records and then all the other virtual care. bringing lots of change, right? And it, it was hard for them because they were dealing with other stressors, and it's like, oh my gosh, IT, right? So oftentimes IT became the bane of clinicians because we were bringing so much change and disrupting things. And so we made the OKR physician satisfaction. So that was the number one OKR, objective and key result for both ourselves and the medical staff, and our bonuses were tied to it. They had skin in the game, we had skin in the game. So we wanted to do this right. So a year later, I get a phone call from George. He was the SVP for the medical staff, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's he going to say? He's like, Ed, this is George, and I want you to know we just got the survey results. I took a deep breath because I was like, oh my gosh, our we're not going to score favorably. It's going to hurt morale. It's going to hurt bonuses, all those sort of things. He goes, IT was rated number one across all services in the health system, number one. And it's only because we had the shared OKRs, which then drove our performances. So again, I just covered 3 things you can do that are free, that are meaningful, that'll be game changers for you to do digital transformation in healthcare. So I got 3 more on the next slide, 3 more techniques for you. One is enhancing relationships. So this is super easy also. There's the easy things, like I would do walk with Ed. So, our clinicians, our customers, oftentimes they can't meet during the day. They've got to see patients and round at 7. So I would round with them. Or I would say I had this walk with Ed program that started at 6 or 6:30 a.m. on certain mornings. We had a lot of hallways because we were located in a cold part of the country. And so, especially during the wintertime, you never want to go outside, but you could walk for miles and miles. And this was like, hey, let's get our steps in and just chat. And then I also did wine, and it meant both wine and wine, if you know what I'm saying. So after hours, there was a what's it called? A hotel that was attached to our facilities. And so it was easy. There was a common place there. There was a bar there. There was a restaurant. And so every certain night, every Wednesday night, is like, hey, from 5 to 7, I'm just going to hang out there. And if you want to wine with wine, I'm there. And so it's easy. But here's the best thing you can do. Again, it's all free. Is we never had an IT leadership meeting in IT. All right. So have all of your meetings outside of IT. And where do you have them? In your hospitals, in your divisions that you support, in your clinical divisions. And so that's what we did. We met every week as an IT leadership team, and we would rotate around to our various hospitals. And then we'd rotate to our various divisions, our clinical divisions, as well as our corporate divisions like HR and finance. Imagine if you did that every week. It makes a huge difference because then we bring in that C-suite or the leadership team from that cohort that we're meeting with, and we have a dialogue. How are things going? How can we do better? We tour their facility. It is so meaningful, and for both parties. So again, another thing that's free. I could give you so many examples, but for sake of time, I'm going to move on. All right, scaling leadership. So a lot of the things I'm talking about, if you do it all yourself, which you can, and I have, it's not the best way. You need to scale yourself so that you don't burn out and you're more effective, right? If there's what's more effective, 1 of you or 5 of you? So I go with the 5 of you. So how do you scale leadership? It's really easy. And what I'm going to tell you here has spawned 21 CIOs in healthcare. I think that's the number. There's 21 healthcare CIOs today that used to report to me. And it's because I did simple things like what I'm about to show you. We call it Business Technology Leadership Academy. So for a year, we selected, I had 6 direct reports. So our cohort was 7 people because we wanted a 1-to-1 match. So we had 7 people that we recruited in, and this was so popular. It was a competitive process to get into this program. And now imagine, again, you say 7 people, big deal. Well, you do this times 8 years. That's 50 some people. So this really scales quite beautifully. So then what we would do is they would come into the cohort and they'd spend an hour and a half with us per month. And we would teach something super relevant on leadership, on culture, on business and clinical transformation. And then they would also pair up with someone. They'd have an hour and a half mentoring meeting every month. At the end of the year, towards the end of the year, they would meet up as a team, and we'd give them a real business problem we were dealing with, and they'd have to solve for it and present it. And sometimes we actually used their solution to solve something we couldn't solve ourselves. It's things like that. When you build into people, when you help them reach next level, they take your team, your organization next level. And then suddenly it's no longer just me and my 6 direct reports that are leading IT. I've got 50 other people at all levels. Some of these people were analysts working their way up. Some were managers working their way up, directors working their way up, VPs. You can see how this permeates the entire organization. And it's free. All right, last one, strategy and governance. All right, obviously we all know about aligning our strategy with the business, be agile per the Choluteca Bridge. But here's this thing on governance. People still struggle with this. It's funny. When I first got into IT, everyone talked about governance. What are they all talking about today? Governance. It's like mind blowing that we haven't figured this out. But I think I figured it out, at least getting us a lot closer to nirvana. And that is do away with all the superstructure. Like I created a lot of superstructure for IT governance, and it was actually pretty decent, but it took a lot of time and effort, a lot of resource time and effort. And so ultimately, I just came to the aha moment that my IT steering committee was the C-suite. So I approached the CEO and I said, look, give me 15 minutes every other meeting. That's all I need. We can get rid of hundreds of hours of meeting time and a lot of resource, and let's just cut to the chase. And that's what we did. So the C-suite became the IT steering committee. And here's the kicker. Here's how we reduced 80% of requests. Well, one, the fact that they were going to have to present ultimately in front of the CEO and the CFO, that cut down the amount of frivolous requests dramatically. But the other thing that cut it down is we came up with 365-day review, which meant when you came and you pitched whatever you wanted money for, we had one slide, the ROI slide, and we told people they knew that they would be coming back in 1 year. And what are we going to show when they come back in 1 year? We're going to show that original slide that said all their ROI commitments and then reality. So they're going to be held accountable. We're going to be transparent. And it wasn't meant to be punitive. It was really meant to say, hey, we take this serious. We expect results. And as a result, we only got 20% of the flow for ideas to come in. And of those 20% that got funded, almost all of them achieved their ROI. So it's beautiful. All right. So why do we want to do all this? And just doing a time check. Yeah, I'm coming down the last 2 minutes and we're going to do questions and answers. Why did we do all this? I want to tell you, I want to finish with a quick story. So on the next slide, the story begins. So I've been very fortunate to be part of Team USA. So I do this thing called triathlon and duathlon. And so I've been doing it since 2013. So it's my 10th year, heading into my 11th year now. And so 1 year was 2018. I was in a certain part of the United States, far away from my home state where the national championships were. So every year to make Team USA, in order to go to the world championships, you have to qualify. And so in 2018, I was in a race in South Carolina. So now my home at the time was in Ohio. So I was far away in South Carolina. And during that race, during the last 2 miles of the run, I felt this heaviness on my chest. And I was like, well, I can't be having a heart attack because everyone tells me I'm super healthy. I go to all these doctor visits. They did calcium scans. They look at my heart. They're like, Ed, you're top 1% for people in your age group, for men in your age group. You've got nothing to worry about. You're as healthy as can be. And sure enough, I was super, super fit. And so it can't be a heart attack. But then I reasoned, wait a second, all signs are this is a heart attack, although I should be dead. But if I stopped, I was thinking about door to balloon time. So for those of you who have some clinical background on this, door to balloon time is like if your heart muscle is without blood for over an hour, you're going to have heart damage, right? So when people have heart attacks and they never fully recover, it's because they have heart damage. So I knew door to balloon time, I had to get my heart fixed within an hour. So I thought if I stop, by the time they reach us in a race, because races, they stop, all the traffic is blocked with fencing and all that kind of stuff. I thought it'll take them forever. But I knew at the end was the medical tent with the ambulance. And so I was looking at my time and I was about doing 6.5 minute miles now. I slowed down a little bit because of the heart attack. And I was like, all right, I'll get there in 13 minutes. So that's what I did. So on the next slide kind of shows the run, and then you can advance past, you can go, oh yeah, those are some of the some of the tools. You can go past that. It kind of show the run past the finish line, raising my hand on the finish line on the next slide. And then ultimately I ended up in an ambulance, and the ambulance took me to the hospital, and the hospital was waiting for me because they knew I was coming, and they already had all of my data because of that little EKG capability. You see that little card-sized tool there? That's an EKG reader that hooks up to your iPhone. So within the time I was in the ambulance, they had all this data. And when I arrived at the hospital, so you can advance a couple slides, it'll probably take you to me in a hospital bed. So by the time I got there, they said, Ed, there's good news. We're sorry. The bad news is, we're sorry this happened. But the good news is I'm online now with the world famous cardiologist from Cleveland Clinic, which was where my hospital was in Ohio. And we already have a plan. This is a no-brainer. This is going to be super easy. You're going to be out of here in no time. And sure enough, we did the surgery or the cath, and it went beautifully. And then the next thing, I was like, I made the team. So I made it in. Even though I slowed down, I got the last spot on the team. So I told my doctor, look, I want to, in 90 days is the world championships in Odense, Denmark. And I want to make it. And they kind of laughed. They're like, Ed, that's impossible. But because of the technologies you see there, they were able to adjust my meds on a daily basis. Everything was Bluetooth into my system. Yeah, you could advance now probably all the way to the end. And so what happened was, after 90 days, I was healthy and fit. So if you advance to the very last slide, that I finished at the World Championships in Odense, Denmark, representing Team USA 90 days later. And this is only possible because of the technology, because of the transformative, digitally enabled technology that we had. And why did we have it? Because of all those things I just went through, those 6 things that are all free. This story would not have happened, no time for the details, but without making all 6 of those things pop. And it's not just for me, although that's my why, is we want to help save people's lives, people like me, and improve the quality and care of their lives. And so that's really why we do this. That's really why I'm so passionate about sharing some of these ideas of what you can do, because it makes a difference in the lives of people. And one day it may make a difference in your life, just like it made a direct difference in my life. Hope that never happens to you. Happened to me, but glad there's people like you and I out there working with clinicians, working with the business to enable technology such as these to ultimately save people's lives. And that's really it. That's all I have. We're a few slides behind. That's cool. It just showed the very last slide has a year later, the race was in the same location, the national championships. I had a chance to go and meet the people that helped save my life. And that was a really transformative moment as well. All right, I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to turn it back over to Victor and see if there's any questions. Yeah, there's the World Championships, and there's the team that helped save my life a year prior. All right, so Victor, see if there's any questions that people might have.
Yeah, well, first off, let me say how amazed I am by the personal story and the level of engagement and the level of involvement in every single process optimization, and most importantly, your desire to help people, to care about people, which is at the heart of every optimization you initiated. And I'm really amazed by the last story with your personal experience of the heart attack and how you eventually saw the results of caring about people and having caring about people in your mind from the very beginning. That's amazing. And I'm sure that the listeners are amazed as well. I can already see the questions here. And if you don't mind, I will read out some of them to you. Okay?
Yeah.
So let's go. Well, the first one. Thank you for a great speech, Edward. From your own experience, is there any way to predict the river move when thinking of business transformation overall?
Yeah, I think one way is to really look out in the future in other industries. So healthcare generally is a couple years behind. Some may say a little bit more than that. So if you look at other industries, like a great example is consumerism. Consumerism took over a lot of other industries. It's finally come to healthcare, and now we're really having to differentiate ourselves with better service, more transparency, making seamlessness. Right? We used to, back in the old days, we just made patients come to us when we were ready to see them, and we would put them in waiting rooms for an hour. Can you imagine that? Could you imagine going to some other sort of experience and dealing with that? You'd say no way, and you'd go to a competitor. And that's exactly what's happened. And so that's what I would do. Look at other industries, see what's changing, seeing how, I try not to say the word AI the whole time, how AI is transforming other industries, because obviously it's in healthcare as well now, and it's going to continue to be. And so that's one way of doing it, is looking forward in other industries and then taking that back in what we're doing today.
Wow, yeah. It's about reusing the experiences from other industries and domains, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. We've got the next one. Amazed by how Edward is engaged in problem solving and understanding the problems from the inside. Edward, do you mean to say that such an engagement eventually paid out?
Yeah, I can't imagine. I know a lot of my peers would just sit in their offices and just focus on technical things. And it's important you have people like that. But as the leader of the organization, you have to be externally focused. You have to trust your team, give the team what they need for success. And then you need to be out there and making sure that you're developing those relationships, that you're constantly learning more, that you're embedded in the business, doing all the different things that I spoke about. It's a game changer. It makes a big difference. If people think about, and I'm not here to talk about my career. I'm just using it as an example. I started late in my career in healthcare IT, but I think within 5 or 6 years, I became the CIO of a multi-billion-dollar academic health center. it wasn't because I knew a lot more than anyone else with technology. It's just that I did the things that I just shared with you. And it's as simple as that.
Well, yeah. Let me add also that I was really surprised by the story when you spent a whole day with some of the employees, right? Getting into their details, getting into their problems and issues, and eventually understanding that the IT was mentioned most of all. And I'm surprised how this really facilitated the solution of this problem overall in your organization. It was really nice. All right, let's move on. There is another one. Can you provide examples of healthcare organizations that have undergone successful digital transformation when it comes to processes improvements?
Yeah, I think there's many. So I certainly don't have a I don't have time to go into all of them. I'll mention a couple of them. I was very fortunate to write a book a couple years ago called Healthcare Digital Transformation, and in that book we were able to do a lot of research and find different organizations. And I wrote some books more recently on innovation. So I get to see a lot from different organizations. I think I have to say Mayo Clinic because my best friend is the CIO there. But they do a very innovative things. So they've created this culture of innovation, and no one's perfect. Everyone's got a lot of room to grow and do things. But they've done some pretty amazing things, with digital transformation and innovation. I'll name one more, and then I'll tell you something that's more fundamentally important, though. But Intermountain has a pretty good reputation as well. I was friends with the former CEO, and what he was able to do there, the culture, it goes back to culture. And that's really where I wanted to end up with, is that these leaders have created cultures of innovation. So you don't need to be I gave example of big health systems. You don't need to be a big health system to be innovative and do these sort of things. And you don't need anyone with the title of innovation or transformation to do these great things. So that's kind of a misnomer. And I should have given you maybe better examples of smaller healthcare systems or small hospitals doing it. A lot of times we acknowledge just what the big ones are doing because they have the brand. But you can do this anywhere.
That's true. That's totally true. And to the listeners, be sure to get your copy of the book. All right, let's move on. We got some few more questions, if you don't mind, so that we could answer the last two. The first one: how do you think can healthcare organizations really ensure smooth digital transformation without compromising patient safety and care? Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah, that part of the reason we're so far behind is because we have this risk adverse culture for good reasons, right? Because that's the way we were raised, especially on the clinical side, is that do no harm, and so we're very careful. So what I say is, do in areas that don't impact clinical care, be radical with innovation, take risks, accept failure, when you do it quickly, right? Agile principles, fail quickly, and work with partners, work with startups. Don't try to do it yourself, and that's how you mitigate some of the risk as you go into the patient care side. So you're starting to change the culture a little bit, which is the first example. Then when you get to the patient side, work with your partners, work with your vendors, and then that way you can reduce some of the risk because they've got more experience and they can help you with safeguards, and then start taking a little bit more risk because nothing venture, nothing gain. And again, I'm not talking about being silly and taking people's lives into danger, but I think we can do a lot more. So I think we become so far risk adverse that we're actually hurting the patients. So I think we have to move back to the center. And those were some of the ways that I just talked about that can help us get back to that center.
Totally agree. All right, thank you so much. The last one. What do you think about the recent AI regulation initiatives from the US government, specifically in healthcare? Oh, yeah, we tried to avoid it, but we can't.
Well, I take a very cautious approach in general with AI. Work like we're talking about with the risk is like let's push the limits. And yeah, I think there are guidelines from the government. Let's push the limits in areas that won't like impact negatively patient care. So there's lots of examples, right, that are going on today, which I think are great. Is like routine responses to patients is a most popular example because that's being experimented with now. You're not going to ruin anyone's life by doing that. So I think we got to move boldly, quickly, try lots of different things. And at the same time, be aware of, particularly around the large language models that may have inherent biases and things like that in them, so that we don't perpetuate bias or discrimination within our systems. We don't make things worse. So that's my only cautionary tale, is like, be very mindful of that aspect. But other than that, take the regulations for what they're worth. But I would push hard and try different things and let people experiment. I think enough people are interested on their own. You don't have to, like, again, you don't have to create positions. You don't have to create a title. You just ask people to go do it. There's a lot of people. I mean, that's a thing. It's a whole other topic. But there's a lot of people already in your organization, in your IT shop, that have their self-interest in it. Like, oh, I want to learn this. Let them go. Give them something. Give them 10% of their time, and let them riff on something and come back with some ideas. And that's how you make change happen and transformation happen.
Wow, yeah, totally agree. Thank you so much again for sharing your personal experience, sharing those amazing stories of caring about people and transforming businesses for the healthcare. Thank you so much also for answering the questions. We will now be able to move on, I guess, to our next speaker. Thank you so much again, Edward.